There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch, Michael Ryder.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. You know, folks, we've all been sort of glued to the story of this whole Gilgo case since the arrest of Rex Heuermann. And a lot of us, even in law enforcement, we heard about this task force that was brought in by retired NYPD Chief of Department, Chief of Detective Rodney Harrison, and a great idea. However, one of the things that was lost on me, and maybe a lot of people that have followed this case, is a lot of this case, of course, took place in Nassau County. Where does Rex Heuermann live? Massapequa Park. What county is that in? That's in Nassau County, right? At least two of the bodies were recovered in Nassau County. A lot of this case, when they talk about the box, occurred in Nassau County. And I happen to know that Nassau County was integrally involved in this case from the very, very beginning. However, you don't hear them mentioned. Is that because they're just very humble guys? Or is that just because there was maybe an oversight? So when we think of the task force, it was the Suffolk County Police, the Suffolk County DA's office, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, the New York State Police, and the FBI. So 5 entities. However, there was really 6 entities. Nassau County was integrally involved in this investigation from the very beginning. And to see how they were involved and what they were involved in, we brought in the Nassau County Police Commissioner, Pat Ryder. And Pat Ryder is a 38-year veteran of law enforcement. He actually started out on the NYPD in 1984, and he's come up through the ranks of Nassau County. So he's seen this case from its infancy, and he knows all the inside stories of this case and the do's and don'ts and the has and the hows, all of those things. And when you read that 32-page bail application, it really reduces the case to its lowest common denominator, where it sounds like, wow, I could have solved that case, you know. But believe me, it was much more complicated than that. And of course, that 32-page bail application document really explains the case to the outsider, to even the insider, and makes a very complicated case somewhat simple. And believe me, there was nothing simple about this case, especially where all the victims were found in different locations. And it was sort of reduced to what has been known as now is the Gilgo 4. Because, of course, Rex Heuermann was only charged with 4 cases so far, right? And that's not, there's 7 more victims of this case. Now, was Rex Heuermann involved in all of them? Is he responsible? Or we see on the screen the Gilgo 4, the first victims identified. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, missing since 2007. Melissa Bartolome, missing since 2009. Amberlynn Costello, missing since September 2010. And Megan Waterman, the fourth, missing since 2010 also. And again, all of these victims were recovered in different locations. And we'll get into perhaps what the catalyst was in finding these people. But before I get too carried away with my monologue here, I'm going to bring on Nassau County Police Commissioner Patrick Ryder. Pat, welcome to the show. I don't know, you just disappeared. I'm not seeing you back. I'm not seeing you on camera. Your camera's not working right now.
My camera's on. I see both of them. There you go.
There you go. So, Pat, actually, I should call you the respect you deserve, Police Commissioner. It's Police Commissioner. you've been around a long time in Nassau County, and your 38-year law enforcement career, all but 2 years was spent on the NYPD. So you've been spent on the Nassau County Police for 36 years. Give us a little bit of an overview of the involvement of the Nassau County Police in this Gilgo case.
So I started back in '84 in the NYPD. I came into Nassau in '86, and my career evolved. So I'm in my 40th year, going to start my 41st in January. About 12 years ago, a good friend of mine, Phil Frendo, who's a Suffolk County homicide detective, and his partner, Pat Patella, came to me and said, hey, can we have a conversation? It's got to be kept confidential. Yeah, absolutely. They come out to my office in Massapequa at the time, 2 blocks from where the homicide was. I mean, where the killer lived. And they talked about the Gilgo murders, and they talked about an area called the Box, the famous Box area. And it was an area in Massapequa. I said, okay. And they go, what we'd like you to do is to work up every single house inside the Box, starting from, where the house was built, when it was built, what year, who's ever lived there, what kind of cars, calls for service, any other time there was any kind of police involvement, construction, contractors involvement. So we said, okay, but we want to keep it quiet. And you can't discuss it with anybody. You can't talk about it. We just want to keep this as down low as you can. That's why you don't hear us mentioned in the task force. When we got this assignment, we did several hundred addresses. And every time we finished a box of 50, they would come and pick it up. I had 3 civilian analysts that worked for me at the time. They were sworn to secrecy, and they would work up these boxes. So every single house within the, as we all call the famous Box area, was worked up and then turned over to Suffolk. So Rex's house was worked up. Rex was worked up. But there's nothing on Rex. There was nothing on his house. There was, a lot of tips that were coming in from all over. But those 2 detectives did a great job. The final group at the end, the task force, which again we stayed out of, but we still did work for Suffolk County, along with the state police and the FBI, Suffolk County DA, and Suffolk County PD, did a great job in finishing it. And I spoke to Phil earlier today, and he said, "Listen, give credit to what credit is that state trooper did a great job." The groundwork started with Nassau and Suffolk working together. It got finished with the task force.
And Commissioner, the state trooper you're referring to, she did something called a lawman search, which is a database that the state police have access to. Well, actually, all New York police departments have access to it, and it's very particular in how you run a vehicle. You run it as a car, you run it as a truck. If you don't run it the correct way, you may not get the results that you want. But absolutely, I believe it was a female detective. She deserves all the credit in the world. But there's a lot of different stops and starts to this case. And I just wanted to play a little bit. Everyone is convinced that, of course, the conspiracy theorists, that the Shannon Gilbert case is part of this Gilgo serial killer thing, and even larger and more nefarious. And I want to play a little bit of the tape that everyone refers to when they listen to this case. And let me put it up on the screen, and then I'll get your comments.
Did not reveal what happened to Shannon or where she was. But it did uncover something even more shocking: a series of bodies and a potential serial killer. And as more bodies were discovered, the search intensified, and finally, 18 months later, Shannon's body was found. Tonight, we take a listen to the 911 call made by Shannon, which took 12 years to release, and we try to uncover what happened to Shannon, how she died, and why this case has still not been solved. I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. You know, when you...
I am? I'm sorry? Yes, please, where I am. No, I can't. What's your callback number you're calling from? Huh? What phone number are you calling from? What is after this? Please. Are you in Suffolk County or Nassau County? I'm in Long Island. Where on Long Island are you? No. 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 No, stop, no. Where in Long Island are you? In Suffolk County? Nassau County? Huh? Why? Why you call me by my name? Why? County, you on the line? Stop. Please. Stop it, please. Please stop. Please, into the door?
No, time to go.
Please. Please.
Please. Go that way, please. Come on, let's go. Come on, roll that side. Come on, go outside. Come on, all of us. Come on, over outside. Come on.
No, please.
Come on. Please, come on.
Please.
Now, Commissioner, a lot of people are convinced, of course, that she was murdered. Now, let's just give a little background. Shannon Gilbert was an escort. She was called to that location. She had a driver named Michael Pack that drove her from Manhattan to this location to a guy, I believe his name was Joseph Brewer. So she was hired for her services. And something went bad. I mean, it sounds like there was some drugs involved. But I think the theory of the police department, of the Suffolk County detectives, is that in running away through the marshes there, she perhaps drowned. And I think the autopsy that was conducted by the Suffolk County medical examiner came back as inconclusive and was never ruled anything other than, I believe, an accidental death. However, the family's attorney, Shannon Gilbert's family's attorney, John Ray, he hired former New York City medical examiner, Michael Baden, who came in and really gave the same exact results, except he said the hyoid bone was fractured, therefore I'm ruling it a homicide. Your thoughts?
So every investigator has their own way when they do an investigation. I believe, from what I understand from speaking to the Suffolk Police Department, I believe that she did run away. I believe she ran into that muddy, swampy area. And growing up here on Long Island, you get sucked in once you go into it. It was cold. It was a fall winter night. She jumped off that boardwalk not knowing where she's going. And as they found in there was a shoe at one point, her pocketbook at another point, and then finally they found her. Look, it's a tragic ending for her. But I believe the theory that her own death was caused by running into the swamp. What happened before in that house? Obviously, she was hired for a service. It didn't sound violent on that call as you heard it. She just did not want to leave. But at the end of the day, I believe Suffolk did a thorough investigation, and I think their conclusion was correct.
You know, Commissioner, I have to throw this in there too. And of course, Chief Burke. Not everyone, but many people in the YouTube world and just in the public believe, based on his background and his recent arrest and the fact that he was at one point running this investigation, that people somehow are tying him to this death of Shannon Gilbert, and that this was some kind of sex ring that met at this area of Oak Beach. And I mean, there's no evidence to that. However, I think it also throws a lot of credence into it when you get a pathologist like Michael Baden that says the hyoid bone was broken. That's indicative of death by asphyxia or death by strangulation. And that makes it just that much more a mystery.
Yeah, there's going to be a mystery. And look, everybody's got a theory. Everybody's going to throw it in. They're going to throw Jimmy Burke into everything right now. Jimmy didn't help the case by having that situation last week, 2 weeks ago. But again, anybody who knows Jimmy is a very smart man, very intelligent, very aggressive as a investigator. Most of us that are supervisors took his courses. We learned how to take tests from Jimmy Burke. But at the end of the day, I'm going to stand by Suffolk's conclusion. I think Suffolk did a thorough investigation, and Suffolk gave the result that they did, along with their medical examiner. And I understand there's another medical examiner that gives his medical opinion. But at the end, as it turns out, when we look at all this evidence, and even now that Rex has been caught, could there be more cases? I'm going to let Suffolk County continue their investigation and give those answers. Was this one part of it? I don't think so. I believe, and I spoke to my own homicide guys when we had a piece of the case, and they believed that the body she had ran, unfortunately, into that muddy area.
Commissioner, I look at it also in a similar way that you do, and I think the conclusion is correct. However, there's so many things that, we call it in New York, fugazi about this case, But usually if someone is in fear, and to me, she sounds a little bit like she's drugged up, to tell you the truth, in my opinion, from hearing those. And don't forget, there was 3 911 calls initially from her. Then she went to this gentleman's house, sound like an older gentleman, who actually called 911 himself.
Correct.
And she went to some female's house who wouldn't let her in the house, and she made the call. And then you could hear her talking to Michael Pack, who was her driver. And she, all of a sudden, she didn't know his name. And she appeared to be like, "Who are you?" And, "How do you know my name?" He drove her there, and he was her steady driver, apparently. So to me, that says there's some kind of drugs involved. But I don't think, and look, no matter what you say, people are going to think this is a conspiracy. And it doesn't help the whole case to think that, Chief Jimmy Burke was running this case between 2012 and 2015, I believe. And people see the fact that he didn't want to have the FBI in on the case. That also makes people suspicious. Like, was it that he was afraid that they were going to investigate him? Or did he just have this disdain or this hatred for the FBI?
I'm a firm believer in partnerships and cooperation. We run our intel unit exactly like that. That's why Suffolk came to us and asked for that help early on. But on the other side of it, there's always territory, and there's always, hey, this is my shop. I'll take care of my house. And, again, I don't know Jimmy's reasons for why separating. Was there just emotions and stuff got ahead of it? I don't believe the theory that, he's involved in these. And again, prove me wrong, and I'll be the first to then look at the evidence. But right now, I believe Jimmy is getting dragged into all of it, right, because of what happened and his own situation. He made his bed, and Jimmy's a big boy, and he'll lie down in it. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to strive to the theory that he's involved in these murders. You got to show me some evidence. Partnerships break up all the time. I don't think Jimmy should have disbanded that. I think Jimmy should have stayed with it. I think the FBI who provided the box, who got them started. But Suffolk County is a great police department. They got some great detectives, and they're very proud of the work they do. So again, they came together with that partnership. At the end of the day, Rodney Harrison and Ray Tierney did a great job bringing them together and getting it done.
Commissioner, this is like a case of a lifetime for any investigator, or any investigative unit, a detective force, a homicide. You don't get a case like this. And first of all, serial killers, they seem to have been in the news all the time lately, but they're rare. And one of the reasons they're rare is because by the FBI definition, you have to commit 2 or more murders with time in between. So because of technology, specifically video cameras, DNA, computers, cell phones, all of those things, it's very difficult for someone to get away with 2 murders and not get apprehended after the first one. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does happen. However, with new technology, even like investigative genetic genealogy, serial killers and serial rapists and that type of thing may become, in the very near future, a thing of the past.
Technology has taken us in 12 years, technology is so advanced in the DNA in what was used in this case. You heard Ray Kearney talk about it. You heard about the advancement of using intel and tracking it, doing a lawman search, which has been around for a long time. But if you don't do it exactly right, you're not going to get the results you're looking for. But you can never replace boots on the ground and the investigators going out there and doing it. Bringing a task force together, made that happen, made them come to that conclusion. But technology today, without the body, becomes difficult. As soon as there was a body recovered, now it starts to put the pieces working backwards, looking at phone records, taking tower dumps off the phones, GPS, license plate readers, cameras, your cell site information. And again, that takes good, hard work by some good detectives, putting that together to find that gray truck, as that trooper, the young lady the young trooper found, to find the gray truck. And then it's not just finding the gray truck, it's working backwards to where the rest of it belonged. So she did a good job putting that together. And then the team came together with what started it, the box. Don't forget, that's where it started. And I'll take some credit for the Nassau County Police Department. We put those files together. We didn't look them, we didn't research them. We put them together and handed them over to Phil and Pat, and they did their job.
Commissioner, you talk about the box and the burner phones and the cell site technology and the phone hitting here, hitting there, bouncing here, bouncing there. And it sounds very simplistic. However, it's extremely complicated. And I remember when I was working homicide, we would have very specific guys that would do the cell phone work because it was so tedious and so complicated. Oh, this is where this phone called that phone, and then that phone. Who is that other phone? And all of that stuff had to be put together. And as I said, not a simple task whatsoever. And you would usually have your designated guys that would do that very specific work.
Yeah, that's where the task force comes in, the expertise of individuals to do that. This thing has sent us in such an advancement of what we think we can hide from, but it also exposes us. And exposes us in a lot of ways. If you're going on that TikTok or you're going on some of these social media sites, and then all of a sudden what you're searching a day later shows up as an advertisement on your phone. Don't think for a minute, the analytics that's inside of that is repeating and finding where they want to go and start looking at it. So they did the same thing. They took the common number from this box, Massapequa, Manhattan, and Gilgo, and said, okay, what number is hitting all of them? And, what's the common thread? It was a burner phone, so it didn't come back to a Rex Heuermann. Now you got to find out where the burner phone was purchased, and then you got to start working back from there. They did phenomenal work. They really did. Putting this together was not an easy thing. Unfortunately, it doesn't bring back the 4 young ladies or the other several that are out there now. Proving the other 7 cases is going to be even tougher. But you know what? If it belongs to Rex as the killer, they will find that. If it belongs to someone outside, they will also find that. Because now that they have the body, they'll get the evidence and they'll start working it back.
Absolutely. I want to show this interview of Rex Heuermann. This has been sort of a famous interview.
Where you're from and how long you've been in New York.
Okay. Rex Heuermann. I'm an architect. I'm an architectural consultant. I'm a troubleshooter. Born and raised on Long Island.
Okay.
Been working in Manhattan since 1987. Patience.
That's funny. I was hoping you would say that.
Yeah. Patience, and I don't like to use the word tolerance, but sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
And it's not just with the city, it's also with the client.
Of course, knowing what he did and what he was arrested for, you can look at that video and say, oh, he's a creepy, creepy guy, you know. But had you not known that he was arrested for the Long Island serial killer, you would have said he seems like a big nerdy guy, you know. At least that's my impression. But now, of course, everyone always says, oh, I knew he was the serial killer. Everyone also always has 20/20 hindsight after the fact, you know. I knew he was the serial killer. I could tell. No, you couldn't, you know. If anything, when you look at that interview, which says a lot about him, it just says he's sort of a big, I don't know, a big nerdy guy, I would say. Your thoughts?
One of the biggest lines that kind of fits into what you're saying right now is someone came up to me afterwards because, did you see the house? I go, yeah, I was there the night that the arrest was made. I was there when they took the family out because I was, again, called as being part of it. And they go, if you look at that house, that's definitely the house of a serial killer. I go, oh, yeah. What does a house of a serial killer look like? You know, but this is the mentality of what's out there. And everybody's got a theory. They got an idea, including, and again, everybody's taking a shot right now. You know, so and they're going on these radio stations and these podcasts and news stations, and they're taking a shot at Suffolk County. They're taking a shot at Jimmy Burt. They're taking a shot at the task force that broke up. Time will tell what was right and what was wrong. But I will tell you this is that it's never easy to solve these things. Otherwise, we'd never have a serial killer. It takes time to put evidence together. And the way the laws are today with bail reform and discovery, if we're not right and we turn over something or fail to turn something over, you're going to have a case dismissed, or maybe one of the cases of the 4 dismissed. So, you know, Ray Tierney poured it out. He let everybody know what he had. And he basically said it, you know, and I'm sure he's got a couple of cards up his sleeve. But people are like, oh, he talked too much. He gave too much. I go, no, what he was doing is letting them know how much he had. Here it is. You're getting it anyhow in 14 days. That's the laws. And might get an extension with a homicide. But you're going to get everything anyhow. So here, I'm going to tell the world what I got, and let's see if they can defend it.
You know, Commissioner, the unfortunate thing, I think, is that, of course, we have all these victims. And many were saying, of course, during this investigation, that they didn't pay as much attention to this because these girls were sex workers. And many, I think even the attorney for Shannon Gilbert implied that, and people want to believe that. But I mean, I never believed that. I mean, I know in the NYPD, we work just as hard, no matter what the person's station in life was. And that wasn't a consideration. But people are always going to say that also. Or they just didn't care because these were sex workers. Your thoughts?
Walk in the shoes of a homicide investigator, what he goes through. They own their victims. They own the family. They never let go. They never give up. They wake up in the middle of their own families, and you know something happens and they have to leave and go handle it. There's no doubt in my mind they never care about race, religion, gender, or occupation. They care about that's a victim. Suffolk County never looked at them as sex workers were part of the clue or the commonality that would help solve the crime. So people still refer and say sex workers. They were still young women that were brutally murdered by Rex Heuermann. So at the end of the day, you know, I again, compliments to Suffolk County, PD, DA, state police, everybody that worked on that case. But don't anybody ever think out there that they treat somebody different because of their occupation or their race, religion, agenda. You're a victim, and we give our victims a voice.
100%, and I always believe that. Let's get back to again. You used the term commonality, in which it's very important in a homicide investigation. And the commonality here, of course, was the victims were sex workers, escorts, if you will. And then the next huge piece of evidence, of course, were these burner phones. And the burner phones making calls into the cell phones of the victims. Now, again, when you read that document, that bail application document, it sounds so simple. Why didn't they put this together earlier? However, we know that do this kind of work, It's never simple. As you said, there were hundreds of houses and the yet unidentified Rex Heuermann could have lived in Massapequa Park. I know also the phone pinged in Freeport. It pinged in Suffolk County. It pinged, of course, in Manhattan, which turned out to be near his office. So just talk a little bit about that evidence and how, just even how strong that evidence is. There's people already saying they don't have enough evidence against Rex Heuermann. And even the cell phone evidence itself, to me, and of course I'm pro-prosecution, it's extremely strong.
Trust me when I tell you, they have a strong case, and they did a lot of work to put it together. But it's not done overnight. It took me, my 3 analysts, not me. I didn't do a darn thing. They did all the work. But the analysts did the work. It took them 2 years to complete it. And every once in a while, they'd come back with another batch of addresses and said, hey, can you work these up? Can you work these up? And we kept our mouths shut, and we did exactly what we asked. That's what a partnership's supposed to be about. We're not looking to take anybody's credit, but we did that side of it and got it done for them. That's what Suffolk asked. That's what they got. When you look at phone records and you look at burner phones, someone goes into a store, they buy this burner phone. The only way it identifies is the ISN number that's inside of it, right? And that number is the serial number to it, because this phone has got to identify to Verizon to get paid, or whoever the server is. And they buy the phone, they buy the card, they load the card up, and they use it. It comes back to nobody except for the phone, a number. Where did this number get purchased? Well, it got purchased in Manhattan. They start looking at what store it was purchased at, how many other burner phones were bought there. Okay, 3 burner phones. Nobody has the video from their store from 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 5 years ago, never mind 5 months ago. So we don't have somebody on video buying it. Did he use a credit card? No, he paid cash. So, and again, these are I'm giving you examples. I don't know the facts, but they're paying cash on these phones, and that's how they get the phone. And then all of a sudden they're anonymous in the world. So they make their phone calls, they do their research, and then they make the connection to the girl. The girls all had steady phones. They had their work phones. And those 3 numbers all called similar, that burner phone, or at least one time that burner phone. And then they called a separate burner phone. So now they got to put them together. They find the store, they find the area. Okay, he's calling from Manhattan. He's calling from Massapequa. He's got to live in Massapequa. They take the cell site area and they take a dump from it. They take all the phone, thousands and thousands and thousands of numbers that come off these towers. And now they got to put it into a sheet, and now they got to run that down. And they say, okay, what's the common number here of these numbers that is calling Manhattan? Well, 50% of the people call Manhattan at one time or another. So did they call into this area of Manhattan? Then they start working that numbers backwards. And once they do it, they start to get cell records. And when they get cell records, then they look for where the cell phone numbers are coming from. Who's getting called? Well, Pat's getting called 3 times a week. Bill's getting called 7 times a week. Bill's a popular person on that phone. Let's run that down. It's a lot of work. And I just gave you a simple explanation of it. But it's tons and tons of hours and computers and analytics to put that together to find the commonality that said, hey, the killer's in the box. Now we got to find in the box where he is.
Let's talk about the search warrant at Rex Heuermann's house. And, it was something funny when you talked about his house. And, of course, that does not look like the house of an architect. There was an episode of The Sopranos where they were after this Russian guy. He turned out to be special forces. And they found out he was an interior decorator. And one of them said, his house looked like shit. That's what I felt. It was the same thing with Rex Heuermann's house. He's an architect, but his house looked like shit. And it's when cops say that something is cluttered, which is the language they use to describe his house, I can imagine the inside of what that house looked. And I hope, and I would sure you probably know the answer to this, that they took videotapes prior to them enforcing the search warrant, enacting the search warrant before they did it, because all the attorneys said, "Oh, they wrecked the house." The house was probably wrecked before they even got there.
Every search warrant's done the same, whether it's my house or Rex's house. They come in, they videotape the entire premise first, then they back out and they systematically do their search, room by room by room, evidence by evidence, and they label and they number everything. And in this house, it was difficult because of the smell that was in the house and the filth inside. You saw them go in with a white suit. So 95-degree weather, no air conditioning on in the house. You go into that house, it's hot. You're only lasting 25, 30 minutes. You're coming out with the evidence that you got. You're labeling it, putting it, storing it in the truck. You go back and do it again. And then when they're finished with their search warrant, they videotape the premise again. And this way they show exactly where everything, what the condition was when they left it. On top of it, every piece of evidence they take out gets photographed and gets labeled and gets a sticker. They did a pretty good job. They did an excellent job with what the conditions they were dealt with. The house did not. As you saw the outside, the inside was worse. I saw inside the garage area, and it was a mess. Again, some people live differently.
You know, Commissioner, one of the things is also, so these cases were approximately 13 years ago. Was there any possibility, and I've heard people speak upon this, and I want to get your feelings. Could there have been, was there, and you won't answer that, so I won't ask it, but could there have been forensic evidence recovered in this house based on, maybe it was never cleaned. So potentially if he committed any of these murders inside that house, could there still be trace evidence, blood, hair, fibers?
Absolutely. We're exhuming a body that we had from 1989, and because we believe there's DNA still in the body that we can now test in the new way that DNA gets tested. So when you look at a house like that, dried up blood, hair, it's difficult. You know, coming into a pristine home and then finding a hair that's on the floor is one thing. Going to a house that's cluttered and there was an animal in the house, you got hair everywhere. So again, they're going to look for hair. They're going to look for blood. They're going to look for semen, any bodily fluids, you know, clothing, any kind of, you know, serial killers like to take a badge of honor, like they'll take the underwear of the victim. So they'll go in and they'll systematically go through every step of it. And it takes a long time. The crime scene people are very dedicated to what they do because they know their results is sometimes what makes and breaks a case. So it's tough going into a clean house. It's even tougher when you go into dirty.
Absolutely. I've been in all of them. Trust me. But, you know, one of the things that, like you said, what you guys no doubt were looking for was a trophy, as you just described, a souvenir, anything that he may have taken from any of these victims. But you also may have a trophy of a souvenir from someone who has not yet been identified. So therefore, you have to identify, maybe put it out in the press once you catalog and photograph and collect all of this evidence. You may have to put it out to the public. Does anyone recognize this? Much like they did, you know, when this thing right here, the belt, right? And I, you know, there's a whole other discrepancy in the way people do things. And the NYPD, and you brought it with you to Nassau County, we believe in using the public to help solve cases. And sometimes certain law enforcement organizations, they want to keep everything quiet. And that's not the way we work, because I think you can use the public. What if someone, and it didn't happen in this instance, what if someone recognized that belt, a victim, or someone out there said, that belongs to so-and-so. And it didn't happen, but the potentiality is there that could happen. And same thing with the evidence or the items that you've removed from that house. Someone could reckon that's my sister's pocketbook, or that's my sister's shoes. And I can't even imagine the voluminous nature of all the stuff that you took in and had to voucher, and to even determine whether or not it is evidence.
Suffolk will go through it piece by piece what they've recovered. They're on a time schedule, you know, because it's discovery, but it's only discovery when we realize it's part of the case. If we don't know what it is, we'll get an extension. But I'm sure Suffolk, if there's something they were going to put out, they're going to get it out there. They're going to want the public's help. I got 2,500 cops. I got 1.4 million residents. I'd rather use the eyes of 1.4 million people than just 2,500. But my 2,500 are experienced investigators. So let's first use them, and then they'll make the decision about what they should put out when they put it out.
100%, and that's so damn important. I have to make a quick announcement, folks. This is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and give us a like. And if you want to support us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. We also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels. And I thank all you folks that have supported this channel. Tonight on the show, I have the privilege of having the Nassau County Police Commissioner, Patrick Ryder, who's given his unique view of the Gilgo case. There's been a lot of different views, a lot of talking heads all over the place, and a lot of people with the inside view on what's going on with this case. But he's given a perspective, and he hasn't actually done much talking. I don't think you guys have seen him on any of the channels. Everyone else has been beating him to it, and he's stayed in the background, but he's extremely knowledgeable. And believe me, Nassau County is and was and will be involved in this case till the very end. Commissioner?
Well, thank you, and thank you for that. We're proud to be partners with Suffolk County. We really are. I rate Commissioner Harrison and I are very good friends. And when he formed the task force, I called him up and I said, "Hey, did you forget somebody?" And he turned around. He says, I wasn't sure. Listen, we're very humble in Nassau County once our partners are successful. And they did a great job. And again, credit to both Harrison, Tierney, the state police, and everybody that did a part in that thing. Going back to Phil Frendo and Pat Patillo, they did a great job. They did, getting that together. And the FBI coming in and putting the pieces. Bringing in something that we may not have the expertise in. That's why you have partnerships. That's why you have task force.
Absolutely. And I know that Nassau County, under your leadership, is one of the most professional police departments in the nation. And I think that's why people want to live in Nassau, because they know it's going to be a lot safer in Nassau County than perhaps New York City. And I'm not going to look, I love the job. I was on the NYPD for 27 years, but people move out to the suburbs for a reason. And that's why they pay you guys the big bucks too, because they expect results, Let me play.
Not my hourly rate, not that high.
Vault in the basement of accused serial killer Rex Heuermann's Long Island home, and are executing search warrants at multiple nearby storage facilities looking for more evidence or trophies from his alleged victims.
To think this guy was roaming around our community for so long, it's truly frightening.
Heuermann was arrested Thursday night.
Rex, did you do it?
And charged with the murders of 3 women, all sex workers. He is also the prime suspect in the murder of a 4th, which prosecutors feel confident they can tie him to. Their bodies were found within a quarter mile of each other near Gilgo Beach in late 2010.
Mr. Heuermann had a double life. I guess at nighttime he turned into this monster.
Police honed in on Heuermann in March 2022 after discovering he owned a truck, an eyewitness connected to one of the disappearances. CBS News has confirmed investigators recovered a car linked to the suspect in South Carolina. Over time, they also found data from 7 burner phones used to contact victims, more than 200 internet searches about the Gilgo Beach investigation, and tied DNA found on a discarded pizza crust to hair found on one of the bodies.
Police found the remains of 11 people in the area of Gilgo Beach, including a toddler. They are now looking at other unsolved crimes.
There's still an awful lot of investigation that has to be done to fully understand how many people were victims to this individual.
Prosecutors say they pushed up their time frame on the arrest because Heuermann was closely monitoring the investigation and was a danger to the community. He has pleaded not guilty to the murders of the 3 women. Elaine Quijano, CBS News.
Again, so interesting. And even the way this case was taken down was pretty damn interesting. And I listened to just about everything on, let me just remove this, on this case. And one of the reasons, or two reasons, that they took this case down and made the arrest when they did was because, A, there was over 300 subpoenas. The potentiality that the target could find out even from one of the companies that are subpoenaed, which would violate the security of the case, is very real. The other thing was that he was still contacting escorts and sex workers, and they were able to, which I thought was brilliant. I didn't know that we could do this when I was on the job. They searched his computer remotely and found out that he was searching some really horrific sites. And these are the reasons. And again, the third part of this was they took him down in the city because he had almost 300 firearms in his house. And very well thought of. The takedown was brilliant. Everything went so smoothly. And, there's so many people that don't want to give credit to this huge arrest, this amazing, because then they hear all the negativity and the noise coming from the other side. They should have had him years ago. And maybe, when we find out about Dave Schaller, are you familiar with that name?
I've heard it.
He was Amber Costello's boyfriend / pimp or whatever. And he allegedly has been on a lot of interviews, was an eyewitness to Rex Heuermann, said he had given the police this information back in 2010, 2011, including the Chevy Avalanche, and describing Rex Heuermann as an ogre. You've heard that word before, right?
Yeah. And everybody's making these wild assumptions. And again, look, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I can't question because I don't know the answer to it. But I'll tell you this: when you talk about the takedown, it was a Thursday, and I had known about Rex, not his name, but I knew that they've identified the guy about a month and a half earlier. And they told me that we're going to schedule a takedown. It's okay. Then as it got closer, they set me up for another. They gave me a full briefing. I gave my guys a briefing, what we were going to do. And it was, I think, a Thursday night was the night of the arrest. And I was just getting home. I was just about to pour myself a nice drink. And next thing you know, the phone rings, says, we got to go now. Got to go now. I thought we're going next week. No, we got to go now. Something had, information they believed the tips were getting out there. They could not let him get home because, yes, he had those 200 and something guns. 96 of them were on his gun permit. We licensed him to have those guns on his permit legally. No reason not to. Background check was done. History into him and who he was and what he did. He was clean, so he was able to purchase hunting and targeting permit and to purchase weapons. And it's not unusual for some of these gun buffs to buy that many weapons. But he also had assault rifles and rifles that he bought. And he did register them with the state. He was very careful not to make those mistakes. But then you get sloppy. You get comfortable, you get sloppy, and a lot of the other guns that were in that house were potentially illegal. We will at some point get possession of them, and then we will look to see what our Nassau County District Attorney is going to do. We'll wait for a turnover order from the judge, and we'll investigate that part of it. But everybody's got something to say, and everybody had something that they were the expert that could have thought, well, it would have been nice if you helped us out 12 years ago and came forward. Don't discredit the good work done by these men and women.
Right. It's difficult when you hear these rumors, these allegations, and many of them, of course, come from the family's attorney. I know the attorney Johnny Ray. I'm sure you know him well. He's been sort of around since the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert, and he I don't think he's ever seen a camera he didn't like, because he's always on the news or getting his picture taken, and he even makes some real crazy allegations against Rex Heuermann's family, that he said that the wife knew all about this, she was involved in it, and he could prove it, he has a witness. And I mean, I thought that was a little strange for him to put out there, because if he has a witness, and there's the family right there. Many people that they talk about the family, and I mean, I believe they're probably mentally ill. I really believe that, because they were living with a serial killer, and I can't imagine even in his day-to-day life that he was a normal guy. Knowing what we know about him.
The son, and I spoke to a couple of the neighbors. One of my cops' aunt lived across the street, and I went and I spoke to her just to make sure she was okay. And and she says, the son would come out. He was cognitive. He would take, maybe autistic. He would take some walks in the neighborhood. Harmless, nice young man. Come home, walk the dog. The daughter, typical kid going to school and looking for work. And then the mom, she was pretty quiet, and you saw she's on a cane. If there was any hint of their involvement, Ray Tierney would have had her arrested, 100%. Now, evidence comes in. They get if these witnesses are out there and they say they know, come on down then. If you're such an expert and you have this witness and you could tie them in that they knew about it, well, then come forward. Come forward to the Suffolk Police Department or the DA's office and tell them what you have and bring your witness. Let's see, man, how many come forward after all they say and get that 2 seconds of fame on the media.
Right. Well, if anything came out of this positive about the whole Shannon Gilbert thing, was the fact that seemed to be the catalyst that got the extended search of the Gilgo beach area. And I want everyone to realize that Shannon Gilbert's body was found in Oak Beach, which is about 5 or 6 miles from Gilgo Beach. And so that was the catalyst, but yet they had to search a huge area of Ocean Parkway and on both sides of the road, I would imagine. Is that correct, Commissioner?
Yeah, Mike, we used back then, I was in Intel, we used our drones. We're kind of brand new at drones. We were borrowing actually drones from people. We were using a helicopter, which can't stay that static over an area for that long. And then it came down to dogs and cops. I had more cops that had tick bites and cuts from that brittle wood that's down there, and walking in the mud. And then finally, the whole lead started when there was a Suffolk canine officer who went out and was playing with the dog on the side of the road, training the dog, and the dog hit on something, and that's what broke the case. That's how it all started coming together. And then from there, they started finding bodies.
Yeah, amazing. One of my friends who is also a podcaster went out there and tried to do a live show from there. And it was like the attack of the killer mosquitoes. He had to flee that area. He couldn't handle it. It was really nasty.
The green flies will eat you alive.
Oh, those horseshoe flies.
They'll eat you alive.
They bite right through your pants too. It's unbelievable. Yep. Let me play a little bit of Rodney Harrison, give him a little more fame. He's been on a lot of shows.
The task force, they were reluctant at first. They were concerned about, I guess, some past relationships where they weren't necessarily part of being inside the loop of the case. So I reassured them. I said, that's something that you don't have to worry about any further. I need you. I need your expertise. I need your specialty teams to really be part of this team of investigators that I'm looking to put together. Secondly, and there's a lot of different avenues I want to talk about, but I thought it was important that we were transparent. You take a look at some of the podcasts and a lot of different things that they were saying about the Suffolk County Police Department and their role in Gilgo, and they're covering it up. I thought it was important that we became transparent. So one of the things that I took a closer look at is, well, why are we not sharing the Shannon Gilbert audio and letting it be known that we believe that it's an unfortunate incident? Like, why are we not sharing that? And after I spoke to my detective lieutenant and a couple other investigators, that was something that we thought was important to share. So let people know, hey, listen, your perception of what happened, your perception of the Suffolk County Police Department is inaccurate. And playing that audio, I think, changed it in the right direction. So in essence, my NYPD experience, learning to be transparent, to get people to trust our organization, I believe was very, very helpful going forward with the investigation.
So Let's talk a bit about the suspect. There's been a lot of reporting on how some reexamination of old evidence led to the arrest of the suspect, Rex Heuermann. But I would imagine, and you'll tell me, you had to go back and did you do re-interviews, new interviews? I mean, it was more than that, yes?
You know, I not only did we do re-interviews, and there was a lot of different investigative steps that I can't tell you every little thing because I'm sure you understand it's still going through a judicial process. But I even took the time out and sat down with John Ray and to see what type of information he had. He was claiming that the Suffolk County Police Department wasn't getting in contact with him regarding information that he had regarding Shannon Gilbert. So I made sure that I made myself available for him and see what he had to do or say, excuse me. I wanted to make sure that anybody that was in our custody was being debriefed. That's why I reached out to Earl Toulon and asked him to put a liaison that's going to speak to anybody who might have been involved in sex work between the time frame of 2007 and 2011, just to kind of re-interview them and see if they knew anything about the Gilgo investigation. So there were a lot of different avenues that we tackled regarding trying to rejuvenate this case. You know, I even took a look at the Crime Stoppers tip award. It was at $25,000. I said, listen, we got to double it. We got to raise it to $50,000. That may get somebody to come forward. The Megan Waterman video over in Hauppauge. I said, listen, let's show that. Maybe that will show people that we're trying to get somebody to come forward and give us information. Any little help can assist us going in the right direction. So putting the task force together, coming with different innovative ideas, things that I learned in the city, allowed us to be in a place where we are today, which was to identify Rex Heuermann and bring him into custody.
Well, I'm going to double back on Shannon Gilbert for a while. Is there anything in the investigation that changes the notion that her death was accidental or that she was not a part of this mass murders out there?
It's a horrible accident. It's a horrible accident. And as of right now, myself and the investigators assigned to the homicide squad still believe that it was just an incident where she ran into the marsh and unfortunately drowned.
You know, Commissioner, I'm on board with that. I think that's what occurred. There's a lot of people that get seriously whipped into a frenzy when you even suggest that. And that's okay. You know, that's their business. But one of the things I want to mention, what Rodney Harrison was talking about, and it is a cultural thing among police departments. And that's to use the public as an investigative tool. And we did it on the NYPD. I know you do it in Nassau County. And he brought it out to Suffolk County because there was a lot of things held that could have really helped the investigation. The belt, the video of Megan Waterman, you know, the 911 tape, of course, of Shannon Gilbert. It also lets people see that, no, we're not trying to hide anything. We're going to show this to you. And if you can help and you know something, you know, the old expression in New York City, if you see something, say something. And I think this helps. And sometimes certain, even other arms of law enforcement, and I don't want to pick on the FBI, but during the Boston Marathon bombings, I think it was the commissioner there, the chief was Ed Davis. And they had the Tsarnaev brothers, who were the bombers, identified. And he said, no, put it out there. And he was overruled. And maybe as a result, and I don't want to blame it on this, but they killed a cop, a campus cop, because they were identified and it wasn't given to the public. And that may have helped in the investigation. And again, getting that information out there and using the public as an ally in your investigation, I think is a tremendous investigative tool.
Without a doubt, 100%. The public is a great partner. But sometimes the public, especially when you put out a reward and you make it bigger, you get all the knuckleheads that come forward and they give you bad tips, you know, thinking they're going to get a piece of this money. I like to say that, you know, we partner up all the time with those, you know, with our partners. But as an investigator, sometimes I'm holding back for a reason. There's something more I know. Rodney and Commissioner Harrison, to his credit, he comes in late, meaning later in this years, and then he says, hey, let's bring something new. Let's start this thing over. Stir it up a little bit. And he did, and some new ideas. And look, put a task force together. Bring the FBI back in. Bring the state police in. He forgot Nassau, but that's another story. And then good man. And let's see what we can do and release this stuff. It was at a desperation point where you were like, hey, we got victims out there, and God knows how many more there could be, right? Let's be a little bit more transparent. Let's give it out. That decision is made by that investigator at that time. The decisions made early on by those investigators, I'm sure they have a reason why. When Jerry Hart came in, she brought a different look to this thing. She was the one who released the belt, and right. To her credit. And again, a different look. It wasn't, if it was that simple, Pat and Fred Phil would have had him in jail already, back then. But it's not that simple. And even when we find a body, it even sometimes gets harder, because now we got to wait for ME results. And, these bodies have been laying there for so long. What are you going to find? What is going to give us evidentiary value that we could use going forward? But again, great police work. You said it early on, though, Bill. It's technology has changed to allow us to do comparison DNA, than not just the straight DNA that we used to do, and mitochondrial DNA, and it's becoming a very scientific world. That's our best friend, but it also becomes our worst enemy if we don't have those tools. So bring a partner. He's got the tools. Let's put it together.
Absolutely. I mean, I was amazed that that they recovered a total of 4 hairs, but 3 hairs belonging to the wife on, I guess it was the burlap bags that he tied the victims up with. And then one of the hairs belonged to him. I mean, that is such power. And a lot of people not understanding trace evidence and Locard's theory of exchange. They're like, oh, the wife was involved. I said, no. The evidence, the hair and the burlap bags were in the house. So her hair got on the burlap bags and he tied up the victims with it. That doesn't mean she's involved. It just means the evidence was exchanged between the two.
And what they look for is, if you give the root of that hair, that's where you're going to get the DNA. Just the hair cut and falls in, you can make a comparison, but getting the root of it will show the DNA. And so, not knowing what type of hair it was, but if it was a root in there, it also says that there was probably a struggle. That's how his hair got pulled out. Things start to play into it that add, the evidence going forward. A lot of it is circumstantial, but you put enough circumstantial on the table, you get a conviction.
Absolutely. Commissioner, I just wanted, before we're over an hour, and I told you we're about an hour, I just wanted to ask you a question. I've asked a lot of people this, experts, forensic psychologists. Do you think this is a 2-part question, the other 7 bodies in the Gilgo area, do you believe, even if we can't connect them, do you believe that Rex Heuermann's the guy with that? And part B, has he done other murders in different parts of this country, or even around this area that have yet to be discovered?
So he had a place in, I believe it was Vegas. He had the Carolinas, his brother's place. He's been to Atlantic City. Could he be involved in other murders around the country? He could be. There's a probability, but do we have any evidence to show that? I don't know that much of it so far, but I will tell you this: if he is involved in these 7, they'll eventually get that. They'll get to that point, when they start going back over. Don't forget, just from the house alone, truckloads and truckloads of evidence left there. That's just like, we look at the phone and go, hey, that's not a good phone. We don't want that one. No, you got to look at the phone. You got to look at the data that's in the phone. Did they find phones there? Did they find any evidence of hair there? Did they, or did they find a lot of hair? And now they got to sort it out and see if one of the victims' hair is there. So they got their work cut out for it. People love to say, oh, they did a great job. The case is over. This case ain't not even close to being over.
Right.
The work has just begun. And, you know, and I believe that Suffolk County and the Suffolk County DA, Ray Tierney, they're up for the fight. And if every bit of evidence that they have that they can make a case on any one of those other victims, trust me, they will. Trust me, they will. Do I think he did them all? No, I don't think so. From what I know, I think a lot of these are, it's a dumping area. You go down that road, there's no lights. You can pull off to the side, shut your lights off in your complete darkness until somebody goes by and picks up your headlights. So it gives you time to do what you need to do. And it's a bit of a lover's lane. People pull over there, you know, and so it's a meet and greet spot. It's a lot of opportunities for people to dump bodies there. I hope that every one of those victims gets closure. I really do. And if Rex is the person, I hope they hang him with it, you know, but we'll see. Time will tell.
You know, Commissioner, it is an amazing thing that, you know, that there was an arrest made on this. And that's no joke. This was a difficult case. Very, very complicated, and mostly complicated by all the time that went by between recovering the bodies and then actually making the arrest 13 years later. It's still not, you know, what I hope for this case is that the 3 cases and potentially the 4th case that he's being charged with, he gets convicted. He's obviously going to get life without parole if and when he gets convicted. Then maybe he wants to talk to get maybe better privileges in prison. That's the only thing he has to sell. And then maybe he'll tell us, you know, what he's done his whole life and potentially other murders, because it's very difficult to tie him to all these other murders when we don't have the evidence tying it to him.
There's always when the gig's up and they're caught and they're done, they got no options. They always say, just look in the cell. If he's sleeping, he's guilty, right? Because he's finally take a nap, right? And it all the time. When he's found guilty of these cases and he's sentenced to life, he may come back if he's done others and say, you know what the heck? Let me get some free time out of this. Wherever I am in jail, I'll go to another place. You know, I'll get fed a little different meal, meet some different people, and then I'll tell you about this murder. And he'll play the game. It's going on right now with the gentleman who killed the young lady at the Green Acres Mall 40 years ago. That case was just solved, and he's a serial killer, has numerous, and I think he's up in Connecticut jail right now. But again, it's that relief part comes over them, and they want to still play the game. This is a lot of this, you know, and again, I'm not the expert, but you read the books, it's all about control. You know, they want to be in charge, you know, of what they're doing. So once his arrest is made and he's found, he has no more control. So we may have to, you know, let him feed into it to get, if he is done other victims. But sometimes they'll do it and just tell you to get the day out, but they don't really know anything. So we'll see. Suffolk will be on it, I'm sure.
One last question, and I'm going to let you go. Are the people in Nassau County sleeping a lot easier now that Rex Heuermann has been arrested?
I don't think it kind of went dormant for a while. You know, it wasn't really discussed. And it was kind of off the radar. So the people in Nassau County, we're the safest county in America 3 years in a row. I got to give my plug here.
Wow.
3 years in a row, we have the lowest homicides in the history of 95 years of policing in this county. We have a zero tolerance. The county executive and the legislative body support us. We're dealing with the migrant issue on the border. We're dealing with quality of life issues, and we're dealing with crime. But we are historic low crime numbers across the board. So the people in Nassau County sleep very well because of that security blanket that's provided by the men and women in the Nassau County Police Department. They do a great job, along with Suffolk and the NYPD. We hope and pray that one day the NYPD will get the support that they need to do the job they should.
100%. Commissioner Patrick Ryder, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know you're very much in demand, and I got you first. I know there's a line of other guys that are trying to get you on their show, but I want to thank you for appearing on the show. And you know, there wasn't anything I asked you that you didn't you didn't answer, and I appreciate that. But I wasn't trying to hit you with any gotcha questions either. But folks, this is Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. We had Police Commissioner Patrick Ryder of the Nassau County Police and their involvement in the Long Island serial killer case, the Gilgo case. And as you could see from this hour of talk, they had a great deal of involvement. Again, have a great night, and I'll see you soon.
Bill, thank you.
It was excellent.
Good.
One episode just ain't enough.